Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Candice Faktor.
Well, thank you so much for hosting me. Although I would like to be 39 forever, I turned 40 in March this year. Just in a minute, I'm going to find my presentation and throw it up. So, as you can hear, I have a little bit of a cold. And it's interesting. I wasn't sure if I was actually going to make it today to come and talk to you guys. With a sty on my eye and a really, really terrible cold, I've had a harrowing 4 days. And it all started when I was in New York City on Thursday. And my son's birthday is on Friday. And I've missed his birthday once, and I promised to myself I would never miss his birthday again. But lo and behold, I was on an airplane, about to take off, like on the plane, next in line, and I got pulled back to the gate and told at New York Airport, sorry, it's snowing too heavily, which it really didn't appear to be. I got to turn back. So I went inside the terminal. 4 hours later, flight canceled. All of New York Airport shut down. And if anybody looked at the New York Times or any news about New York, the city was in mayhem and gridlock. And I actually got stuck on a airport tram taking me from one terminal to the New Jersey train station for about 3 hours with strangers in a packed car. Not exactly the funnest way to spend the Thursday evening, and at 6:30 next morning I left out of LaGuardia and made it home for 9/7 for my son's birthday. Sadly, 24 hours later, I had a tragic death in our family. My uncle passed away. And so at 10 o'clock in the morning, on Saturday, I got a panicked call. And it was my aunt saying, I don't think he's breathing, please get here. And I ended up spending 8 hours in the emergency. And I'm telling you this because I had planned that I would spend 5 days preparing a presentation for you about mindset for the future. And the truth is, I did do a talk, and this is how they found me. I did a talk called Walking the Tightrope last year, which was all about walking the tightrope of exponential tech. I really wanted to do something different. And I am actually going to do something different because it has to do a lot with my weekend. You see, I'm very appreciative of talking about all the things that I've done. And the truth is, I am that typical immigrant kid. Okay, when I was 14, my parents left everything behind. I grew up in a very good way, but we had to leave everything behind to get here. And my parents brought me here at 14 so that I could have a better life. And when that happens, you work really hard. You're driven, you're ambitious, you want to succeed. You go to a good school, you take out OSAP, you pay it back, you get the top job, you work, and you work, and you work, and you work. And when I was 38 years old, I had 2 kids. When I started Wattpad, it was a rocket ship kind of job. And after 4 years, I looked at my life and I was really proud, but I was spent. I haven't stopped. I've taken a lot of responsibility in my life for a lot of people that I was very, very proud of. I helped a lot of people, my kids, my husband, my family, my parents, my employees, but I was really burnt out. And I did something that, to be honest, I didn't actually, it was sort of just very natural, but I knew as I approached that big 4-0, I need to stop. And it wasn't stop like I don't want to work anymore. It was just like before I pick up the call from all those recruiters again to go and do another really big 100-hour plus work week job, maybe I just need to stop. And I did that. And I took space. And it was a really interesting experience for me because it wasn't something I knew how to do. Like, you see, I knew how to take care of a lot of other people. I didn't know how to take care of myself. And inside, there was something that didn't sit right. I wasn't unhappy, but I also knew that maybe there's more to life. And so I decided to just get curious. I made a rule for myself. I said, this year that I left Wattpad, I'm going to do two things. One, I'm not going to take a full-time job, which was really hard, and I'm going to actually get curious again about the stuff that I'm interested in. And one of the things I realized is I'd spent a lot of time in the attention economy, in media, and then Wattpad, really figuring out how to grab people's attention. And the truth is, that's the age we're living in. We're living in a time where it is not the industrial age, it is the attention economy. And the smartest people in the world are figuring out how to capture your attention. And the first thing I had to do is realize that a big part of taking space is actually stopping to pay attention to a lot of stuff that I was paying attention to. The news, my phone, all of the amazing distractions that come into our life. And if you look at the stats that Dr. Haddad put out there, a big reason people would say for the loneliness or the anxiety or depression is people just have no space. The other reason I wanted to really just have some space is that I don't know about you guys, but I'm somebody who's loved disruptive innovation my whole career. And this time, when I was running Wattpad, I felt like things were moving so fast that I didn't know about, right? It was like AI this, and blockchain that, and IoT this, and drones this, and VR this, and everything is changing so fast. You know, and companies that didn't even exist 10 years ago are now massive platforms. And I knew, this is something I really enjoy understanding, was that I want just some space to think about these things. And to really think about what it means for our society, for our business, for humanity. And when I started looking into it, a lot of the same conclusions come up, right? Work is going to look different. The skills people need to be successful are less linear, they're less predictable. And it has to do a lot more with curiosity and creativity and entrepreneurialism and adaptability. The other thing, as we talked about, that I got really interested in was what was happening here. You see, when I was at Wattpad, sorry about my voice, I spent all my time outside of the country. Wattpad was based here, but our customers, our venture capitalists, a lot of our talent was global. And Wattpad was really unique. Like, when I joined Wattpad, there were very few companies like Wattpad, global disruptive platforms that had raised, we raised $110 million in venture capital in the 4 years I was there. There weren't that many companies like that here. All of a sudden, 4 years later, there's a lot of interesting companies who had a lot of ambition and were doing globally interesting and relevant things. And I noticed, having been somebody who's loved Toronto all her life, this place is different. We actually have clusters here. We have AI on a global basis because of this man, and we have blockchain on a global basis because of that man. And I happen to have space in my life for the first time, and I went on a trip with the mayor to Israel. And usually, if you go on these trips, you go, you do your work, you come home. But for the first time in my life, I had space. And I saw something very different. I was like, how does this little country manage to become the top 6, I think it's the 6th or top 5th startup ecosystem in the world? Well, let's look at those conditions. And it turns out a lot of those conditions, not all of them, are very similar to what was happening here. And I said, you know what? I think what I need to do is start my own fund, because I know that there's great technology here. I have the relationships with global capital and customers and talent. And I can see that some of these exponential technologies are going to come out of our ecosystem. And so about a year and a half ago, I raised a fund, made 10 investments. I've already had one exit, which was layer 6. And it all came from just having headspace for the first time to see the forest for the trees. But if I'm really honest, the biggest amount of space that I got wasn't the time, because actually I was really busy. It's that I learned the difference between stimulus and response can be choice. And when there's space, you get to choose. And in my life, being an overachiever, really focused on pleasing and succeeding and winning and being driven, I was really wound up. And I really think about what got me to where I got to was not going to get me to the next place. And that's literally because of this point. I didn't know that it was possible to not be your emotions or to not be your thoughts. And I went really, really deep because I had space into the idea of space. And so there's a concept in mindfulness which is considered transcendence. It's when you are no longer your emotions or your thoughts, but you can rise above them. You get to choose. And I'm going to bring this full circle back to the very traumatic 2 experiences I had. I'm not the same person I was before I took the space. And the reason for that was because when I was on that airport tram, I saw people literally freak out. People were in tears, there were panics, there were thousands and thousands of people everywhere. You couldn't move. And something I really understood was there are things you can control and there are things you can't control. And I had inner space to be calm. Which brings me to the next thing I want to talk about, which is chaos. I don't pretend to be an expert on chaos theory, and I will get into it. But I think there's a lot of very unpredictable things that are happening often in our world. We look at this with what's going on with fake news. We look at this in politics. We look at this in our weather. This was the subway station I was at with thousands of people. You look at it with traffic congestion or things that you don't expect, right? Like, had my plane left 5 minutes before, none of this would have happened. But I got really interested in the idea of chaos theory and tried to understand a little bit about it. And what's interesting about it is that it's really focused on dynamic systems, complicated dynamic systems. And it's very, very sensitive to initial conditions. And when you think about networks, of which we'll talk about what kind of networks, but networks are very complex systems. They're very dynamic, they're adaptive, they're not linear and predictable. Exponential technologies that we're talking about are non-linear systems. And I don't know if anybody's ever heard of the butterfly effect. But this is what we're talking about. It's the idea that very, very small differences in initial conditions can lead to very, very different outcomes. And that approximate initial conditions do not equal approximate end results. And at the heart of it, what you're seeing in Silicon Valley and what you're seeing in the world right now is the sensitive dependence to initial conditions with very unpredictable outcomes. And this is really interesting to me. And it's actually why I chose to go into seed stage investing. But the truth is, these complex systems actually get better. They're unpredictable, but they can have very, very large swings both ways. Unintended bad consequences, positive consequences. because they're networked. And if you look at network effect companies, I'm sure you've heard people talk about this. Most of the value creation in technology comes from this very idea. Comes from the fact that these systems are complex, they're adaptive, they're open-ended, right? And therefore, they have the chance to create a tremendous amount of value. And when you work in a startup like Wattpad, and you work with some of the world's smartest investors, like Clover Ventures and Union Square Ventures and August Capital, this is the playbook. The playbook isn't to predict. The playbook is to find signal from the noise. We didn't determine how people would use Wattpad. We thought we knew. We thought they'd do it to read books. You know? It's not what happened. We had no idea what was going to happen, but we had to look for these little signals. Wattpad took nearly 7 years before it got to 4 million people. And you know what got it to 4 million people? One story in Tagalog in the Philippines that caught on fire. That's it. You know? Find these signals. And when you're building new businesses, it's a different skill set. You've got to be really comfortable with chaos and with understanding how to find signal. And so what you really need is being comfortable with chaos, but having really good processes to get as close to experiment and to figure out signal versus noise as possible. And so I'm sure you've heard of like the lean startup, how you have to build and measure and learn, or the OODA loop from Air Force, right? Which is like just being in constant observe, orient, decide, act, observe, orient, decide, act. Or this is Ray Dalio's thing, but it's like, how fast is your feedback loop? When you're dealing with unpredictable situations, you've got to be really, really fast and adaptable. And honestly, it's all about failure. And the truth is, being the kid I was, which was a responsible, achievement-oriented, pleasing person, I hated failure. Failure was not an option for me growing up. It was up to me. So getting comfortable with failure was everything. And Wattpad taught me that. You see, most people are terrified of unpredictable systems. They freak out. You know? And the real growth for me was learning how to not have this happen. When you are fearful, your brain doesn't work the way you want it to work. You go into fight, flight, or freeze mode. That's it. But these are choices. And through like a tremendous deep curiosity of how certain people seem so calm and I seem so frazzled when things went wrong, I've begun to understand that this was a choice. And I've begun to really learn how to deal with uncertainty and fear. It's not the absence of fear. Fear may still exist. It's the triumph over it. And the way to do that is not by protecting yourself. Fragile things are damaged by disorder, okay? Robust things are resilient to disorder, right? So I'm sure you've heard of like the phoenix that rises from the ashes. That's a great example of your mythology. But anti-fragile things benefit from disorder. It's a great example of a hydra, which is that mythology of a snake. You cut off one head and she grows like 2 more, you know? And that's really what I wanted to learn in this period for me of not having a really protected or fragile career. And last, I want to talk about impact. Because a big part of taking that space for me was about the impact I want to have on the world in my life. And 40 is that moment for me that was like, am I living the life I want to be living? Am I having the impact I want to be having? I just went to my uncle's funeral yesterday. You never know when your moment's gonna be as a really young guy. You didn't choose this. It was sudden. And our impact, when we talk about these complex systems, can be super positive and can be super negative, especially when you're dealing with very complex systems. And really the reason I'm even here is because I wrote a talk last year and something really struck me, which was this moment in time where Mark Zuckerberg said, we're not a media company, we're a technology company. But something really struck me. All these people have good intentions. Most people have good intentions. However, your intention doesn't equal your impact. And I realized about myself, I had very good intentions in many parts of my life, but my impact when I was stressed was horrible. I don't think anybody wanted this to happen who worked at Facebook, but the big problem was nobody was taking responsibility for the impact. We often judge ourselves by our intentions and others by their impact. And I guess my growth for myself has come from really looking hard in the mirror and starting to take responsibility for my impact, not my intention. And for Mark Zuckerberg, and for all of you as leaders in this room, while this is the present, it's also a great responsibility. So I invest in new technologies. And I came back last year from this conference recognizing that nobody was taking any responsibility for the attention economy side effects and thinking, what do I do? Should I invest in AI? It's going to replace all these jobs. What is my role and my responsibility in investing in these technologies? Am I just shaking hands with the devil? But you can't stick your head in the sand. Can't. Technology moves one way. It's very hard for technology to move backwards. So the only option that I thought about was actually participating and actually doing what I believe is right. I know the previous chief data scientist from the White House, this amazing human being, his name is DJ Patel, who was just up here last week for the Ethics of AI conference. It was heartbreaking in some ways when he talked about the work he was going to do at the White House around the ethics of AI and data for President Obama. He is no longer there. And the reality is we are living in times where our biggest leaders may not exhibit the best leadership qualities. So it's up to you. And if you are not part of the solution, you are actually a big part of the problem as leaders. It's not up to anyone else. It's up to you. And that's why I'm doing what I can in my own very, very small way to do things I believe in, like education and skills for the future, like investing in things that I think are going to be net positive for society, not as a social impact fund, not as a gender fund, no, as good business. Because big problems are huge opportunities. This is a company that encrypts data sets so AI can run on top of them. That solves a lot of problems. It's also going to be a really big business. This is a company I invested in that gives you consent for your medical health records. Huge problem. Massive opportunity. This is a company that's a digital wellness company helping students and people in companies and families get unpredicted from their phone. Huge opportunity for our health. So I ask you, How can you make space in your lives, and what would that space do? Are you ready to embrace chaos? And how can you own your impact? Thanks. Sure.
We've got some time for a few questions.
Yes, so what is your definition, or what factors do you look at to determine what is going to be impactful in the future?
So I actually said I don't only do social impact investing. I invest in companies and business opportunities that I think are going to be large business opportunities. But what I look for is that they're going to have a net positive impact on the world. And often they leverage exponential technologies because these technologies allow you to do things that weren't possible before. So for example, the cost of prediction goes down significantly using artificial intelligence as an example. I want to apply that to things that I think are going to be, for the most part, net positive, right? That are going to help society. For example, I invest in a company called Helpware that uses artificial intelligence to better measure heart rhythms and alerts people, your family, hospitals, etc., for when that happens. Ironic, since my uncle just passed away of that today. But just as an example. So impactful is both a business opportunity and usually solving a really big problem. And it doesn't have to be a social problem, but a problem that's going to be really important to businesses and to humans. Yeah.
There's one more question.
How do you use the feedback loops to keep?
How do you use the feedback loops to keep your companies on focus?
That is a really great question. The planning cycles are really short in startups, right? So we do quarterly planning cycles with OKRs, objectives, and key results. And what we're really doing is lots of experimentation. So a great example is Dropout Labs, which is the one I showed you, the encrypted data. I just ran a strategy session for them in New York last week. And while it can be used for so many different things, it can be used for companies who don't want to share data between each other, having a really fulsome data set to run AI over, and then just the companies themselves get the results, right? That's one example. Another example is like health records, or like if you don't want your genome to be seen, you can encrypt this data, have the AI run over your data, and then it can only give you back the results of your genome. Nobody ever saw your genome. But the truth is we don't know. So instead of telling them this is what it should be used for, I say, okay, what experiments are you going to run this month to test out what use cases this can, help? And that was like the big thing that I have to really get unstuck with from Monitor and from corporate, which is we're much more prescriptive over what needs to happen versus creating processes and systems and platforms where we're observing what happens. And when we find it, when we see velocity in anything that actually shows signs of growth, that's when you pour the fuel on the fire. It was like for us at Wattpad, there was a story that we kept seeing these images. It's called After, and we didn't understand it because it was, this is how random Wattpad is, but it was Harry Styles from One Direction. And this other image, just all over, is called After. And it turns out it was a fan fiction of this love story that had gotten this One Direction halo, because One Direction was a hot band at the time, that all these kids were reading, and it started growing, so we started pouring fuel on fire. We started promoting that story. Lo and behold, a couple months later, it hit 1 billion reads. And I met this woman who literally was living in a caravan park. And I said to her, we want to license your story. And she said to me, she didn't return my calls, for the first 4 times. I met her in LA, we licensed her story. She now is tens of millions of dollars air for this little story that started to gain steam. But you have to see those signals. And then we said, okay, well, how do we do this for more people? But it wasn't being prescriptive. It was learning to reverse the learning. Hopefully that answers you.
I think there's one more there.
I was just going to commend you on everything that you've been doing the last 4 days, and clearly you've exemplified the taking space. And I think just listening to that story and reading the context of this was really impressive. So I just wanted to say it's really impressive speech and clearly very impressive all of you accomplished.
Well, thanks very much. I'm very, very humbled to be here, and it's a journey, you know. And I think the biggest thing for me was like learning how to actually make mistakes. And I know that sounds really crazy, but I was like the worst self-critic you could ever imagine. I was so mean to me, you know? And the minute I just like, I don't know, maybe when I did make mistakes, you know, and I just like owned those mistakes and I said, it's okay, I'm just gonna learn from them, and you're not a bad person if you make mistakes. In fact, you're gonna make lots of mistakes to grow, and you change that, your world changes, you know? And I feel so blessed, like I feel so blessed for the journey of like being vulnerable in a way, because I was not like that. And I don't think the work's done. I think there's still lots of growth.
Thanks, Sam. I'm going to jump in. I know that you're going to handle this pretty quick, so maybe someone will have a question maybe I'll answer. So I'm John Hughes from NNP. I'm the National Leader for Private Companies. We're thrilled to be here, Candice. Thank you very much. I think when we're on, we said